The first thing I remember is the sound of the woman struggling to breathe in the darkness, the kind of sound that can make your heart jump out of your chest. My small torchlight was shaking in my hand because I did not know what to do. The whole hospital was dark. The rain outside was beating the roof like stones, and everybody was shouting up and down. But Patience did not shake. She walked straight to the bed like she could see everything clearly, even without light. That was the moment I knew something about her was not normal. That night was the first time I saw her true face. Before that night, Patience was the quiet nurse everybody thought was just gentle and shy. She always came to work early and left late. She never argued, never shouted at anybody, never joined gossip. When other nurses complained that the ward was too hot or the patients were too many, she just smiled small and continued her work. Some people said she kept to herself too much. Some said maybe she was hiding something. But nobody could ever point to anything she did wrong. I was new in the ward, still learning how to handle night shift. The senior nurses warned me that night shift in our government hospital was not a small thing. They said anything can happen. People can come in with accident, asthma, shock, anything. But I was not expecting a total blackout. The generator had been shaking for days, making strange sounds like it wanted to die. But everybody believed it would still hold. That night, it finally gave up. The power went off at exactly 1:17 a.m. I remember the number because the clock stopped at that point. The whole place went dark. Patients started crying. A man in the male ward started shouting for his wife. A woman in our ward woke up and began calling God. I too wanted to call God because the patient who came in the evening, the one with breathing problem, started gasping fast. I shouted for help. Somebody ran to call the doctor. Another person ran to check the generator room, but Patience reached the bedside first. Her face was calm, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She told me to bring tubing. She told another nurse to hold the light. She placed her hand on the woman's chest and started working like she had done it 1,000 times. I watched her and my mouth opened. I had never seen anybody move like that in our ward. Even some doctors could not do it the way she did. In that moment, I knew she was not the kind of quiet person we thought she was. Something deep was hiding inside her. Something strong. That night was the beginning of everything, and I will never forget what I saw. The next morning, after that long and frightening night, the whole ward was buzzing. Even the patients who were strong enough to sit up were talking about how the quiet nurse had saved the woman in the dark. Some people called it skill. Some said it was courage. Some said it was luck. But I knew luck had nothing to do with what I saw. The way patients worked was not luck. It was experience that came from somewhere deep. When I came in for my shift, I walked past other nurses who were whispering. Nobody whispered small again. Everybody wanted to know who Patience really was. People who normally never noticed her were now acting like they had always been friends with her. But she did not act different. She just moved from bed to bed with the same calm face she always had. Quiet, gentle, almost invisible if you were not looking for her. The woman she saved was sitting up that morning. Her children were standing around the bed, blessing everybody they saw. When they saw Patience enter the ward, they followed her like people who had seen a miracle. They kept thanking her. They asked her how she did it. They asked her if she was an angel. But Patience just smiled politely and said she was only doing her work. She slipped away before their excitement could hold her for long. I followed her because I wanted to understand. I asked her how she learned what she did. She did not answer at first. She arranged files on a table like she did not hear me. I asked again. This time, she raised her head and looked at me with eyes that felt older than her face. She told me we should focus on the patients and that every skill will make sense when I have seen enough nights in a hospital. I knew she was hiding something, but I did not know what. And I did not want to push too much. Still, something inside me kept burning. I wanted to understand why someone who clearly had so much knowledge would hide herself like this. Why live quietly when you had a gift that could save lives? By afternoon, the story had reached the chief matron. She called a small meeting. She wanted to hear from everyone who was on duty. We all gathered. People talked. Some exaggerated. Some claimed they helped more than they did. But the matron was only interested in one person. She asked patients to speak. Patients kept her hands folded behind her back and said the woman was in distress. The power went out, so she did what she could. She spoke like nothing special happened, like she just helped someone cross the road. The matron was not satisfied. She asked more questions. Patients answered each one with simple words that revealed nothing about her past. When she finished, the matron dismissed everyone but asked patients to stay back. I waited for patients after the meeting. I watched her come out of the matron's office with a face that did not show any emotion. Not fear, not relief, nothing. She walked past me like the talk had changed nothing. But deep down, I knew things were shifting. Her quiet life could not survive the kind of attention that was gathering around her. Something big was coming, and I could feel it in the air the same way you feel rain coming even before the clouds turn dark. The change started small, like a tiny crack on a wall that nobody notices until the whole thing begins to open. After the incident, people began watching patients closely, even when she pretended not to see them. Some nurses tried to be her friend overnight. Some older ones looked at her with eyes that were not friendly at all, like they were asking themselves why someone like her had been hiding among them all this time. I kept wondering too, but mine was not anger. Mine was curiosity mixed with a little fear. That afternoon, when we were preparing drugs for the evening shift, 2 nurses sat at the corner talking loud on purpose so patients could hear. They said people do not just wake up and know how to do emergency things like that without training. They said maybe she worked in a private hospital and something happened. Someone else said maybe she lost her license in another state. They kept talking like she was not there. And patients kept measuring her drugs calmly, like their words were falling on the wall. Later that evening, the woman she saved asked to see her again. I followed because the woman wanted to thank all the nurses on duty. She held Patience's hand and told her she was the reason she was alive. She said her children had gone to pray for her in church. She said they would never forget her. But Patience only nodded with that same small smile she always used to hide something. When we left the ward, I finally asked her again how she knew what to do in the dark. I told her I was not asking because of gossip. I told her I wanted to learn. This time she stopped walking and faced me. She told me that some things are easier to explain when the time is right. She said I would understand later. Then she walked away before I could ask more. By the next day, the chief medical director sent for her. People whispered that somebody had reported the incident to him. Some said maybe he wanted to praise her. Others said maybe he wanted to question her past. I saw her walking to his office with that same steady pace she always used, but I could tell something inside her had shifted. Her steps were calm, but her eyes were far away, like she was remembering a life she left behind. She stayed in the office for almost an hour. I kept checking the corridor like someone waiting for news. When she finally came out, she did not say a word to anybody. She just went straight to the ward and started working, but her hands were slower than usual. It was the first time I saw her look unsure. Later that night, the matron told us that the CMD wanted a full report of the blackout incident. She said he asked specific questions about who did what and how the patient survived without equipment. She said he asked about Patience's background. That was when I knew something big was opening. Patience was no longer invisible. The light had found her, and she could not hide in the shadows again. And I could see on her face, even if she tried to hide it, that whatever she was running from was now walking toward her slowly, step by step. The truth finally started coming out on a day that looked quiet from the outside, but carried a heavy feeling in the air. The hospital was calm, the kind of calm that makes you feel something hidden is waiting to rise. The patients were not many that morning, and the rain had stopped. But everyone could sense that the story of the blackout night was no longer just gossip. It had become a matter the whole management wanted to understand. The CMD called another meeting, a bigger one this time. Senior nurses, ward heads, and even the doctor on call that night were invited. I was there because I had been on night shift when everything happened. People were trying to act normal, but their eyes kept going to Patience. She sat at the end of the table, Her hands folded on her laps, her face calm like always, but I could see a tiny weakness in her eyes, something she could not hide this time. The Tsigmaid started by asking everyone to explain their role that night. People talked long and added extra things to make themselves look important. When it reached my turn, I said what I saw. I told them how the woman began to choke. I told them how everybody panicked. I told them how patients came forward with steady hands while the whole place was dark. I told them how she saved the woman with skills I had never seen anyone display in our ward before. People turned to look at her. She did not flinch. The CMD nodded slowly and asked her to stand. She stood. He asked her where she worked before coming to our hospital. She said Lagos. He asked which hospital. She mentioned the name quietly, and some people gasped because it was a big name, the kind of private hospital where only highly trained workers ever enter. He asked her what position she held there. She hesitated for the first time since I knew her. Then she said she was the lead trauma nurse. The room went silent. The CMD asked her why someone with that level of skill was working quietly in a government ward without mentioning her past. She looked down at her hands for a long moment, then she lifted her head and spoke in a voice that was soft but heavy. She said she left Lagos because of a case that went wrong. She said there was a VIP patient whose surgery was rushed by a senior doctor who refused to listen to warnings. She said the patient died. She said the hospital management looked for someone to blame so the doctor would not lose his position, and they chose her because she was the one closest to the patient in the last hour. She said she tried to defend herself, but nobody wanted the truth. They only wanted the problem to go away. She said she lost her license. She said her husband left because he believed the news. She said she left the city because everywhere she turned, people pointed fingers at her like she was a killer. She said she came to Enugu to start again silently, without drawing attention. When she finished, the whole room was cold. Nobody expected that kind of story from someone who moved quietly like air. Even the CMD looked shaken. He asked her why she did not tell them when she applied. She said she was scared that the past would follow her again. She said she only wanted to work where nobody would remember her name. The CMD did not shout. He just sat back and sighed. He said they would investigate her case properly. He said the truth had a way of finding light, even after many years of darkness. When we left the room, people did not whisper anymore. They just stared. Some with pity, some with shock, some with respect. But one thing was clear. Patients could no longer hide in the corner of any ward again. Her past was now sitting in front of her, waiting to be faced. The days that followed moved slowly, but every hour carried tension like a rope pulled too tight. The CMD kept his promise and began digging into patients' past. Calls were made. Files were requested. People from Lagos were contacted. Nobody told us anything directly. But news has its own legs, and it always finds a way to walk through hospital corridors. Soon we heard that the case from Lagos was opening again. And this time, people were willing to speak, because the old senior doctor who caused the trouble had just retired. Without his power shielding him, old staff members started telling the truth. While all this was happening, patients continued working. She still came early. She still left late. But something about her had changed. She no longer walked like someone trying to disappear. She walked like someone waiting for a storm, but refusing to bend. Whenever I looked at her, I saw a kind of quiet strength that had been hiding all this time. The woman she saved came back for checkups. Her family followed every update about patients' case. They sent letters to the CMD, telling him the hospital must not ignore the kind of skill she showed. The woman said if patients had not been there that night, she would have died, and her children would have buried her the next morning. The family pushed for her to be honored, not questioned. They talked to journalists, to lawyers, to anybody who would listen. Then one afternoon, the CMD called another meeting. This one felt different. When we entered the room, he already had papers in front of him. Patients sat quietly at the end of the table like always. My heart was beating because I knew this moment would change everything. The CMD cleared his throat and said the investigation was complete. He said they had spoken to staff from Lagos, to people who worked directly on the VIP case, and to those who handled the old report. He said the truth was simple. Patience had warned the doctor. She had begged him to slow down. She had seen the signs that the patient's body could not handle the pressure. But the doctor had ignored her because he believed nurses should not question orders. When the patient died, the doctor panicked. Management supported him because he brought in wealthy clients. And patients became the easiest person to throw away. The Sangam looked up at her and said she was innocent. He said her name was cleared. He said the hospital had already sent her file to Abuja for her license to be restored. People in the room looked at her with wide eyes. Some were shocked. Some were ashamed. Some were proud. Patience did not cry. She just nodded slowly, as if her heart needed a moment to understand freedom after carrying shame for so long. The Sangam went on to say something else. He said the hospital wanted her to take a senior role, to train younger nurses, to lead emergency response for the night shift. He said her silence had been heavy, but her skill was louder than anything she tried to hide. After the meeting, we walked back to the ward together. She moved gently as always, but this time her shoulders were straighter. She was no longer hiding in the shadows. People greeted her with respect. Patients asked for her by name, and for the first time since I knew her, she looked like someone who had found her place again. That night, the ward was bright and peaceful. No blackout, no panic. I watched patients stand at the doorway, checking every bed before the night shift fully began. There was a soft smile on her face, the kind that comes from knowing the worst part of your life has finally released its grip. She did not need to say anything. Her presence said it all. Her name was Patience, and she had earned every part of that name again